Hi everyone, my name is Shauna, in case you don't know, and welcome back to another video. Today I'm going to be filming my October reading wrap-up. October was a very stressful month for me, and the start of November is shaping up to be just as stressful. So I need to film this quickly because I have to film this video, I have to film another video, I have to film a TikTok, and then I have to go work on Spanish homework because I have my first graded Spanish conversation tomorrow, which is like literally my least favorite part of taking a second language. Whew. Hopefully I do okay on that Spanish conversation, but I'm really nervous because, you know, I'm just really nervous. There is one thing I want to share really quickly before I get into the bulk of this video talking about all the books that I read. And this is that I had a, what's it called? Esophageal manometry test. I think that's what it's called. I might make a whole video talking about that in depth more later, but I have some good news and some bad news. Good news is they think they know part of like what's wrong with me and like why I get so sick and why food gets stuck in my throat when I eat. Basically, the test showed that I have ineffective esophageal motility, and it means that my muscles and everything in my esophagus are uncoordinated, so they're not like coordinating with each other to swallow at the same time to get the food down, so that's why it's feeling like the food is getting stuck. So to all the doctors who said it was just my anxiety, screw you. Bad news is that my GI clinic told me that there's no cure or treatment. I was feeling really defeated about it yesterday because obviously if I don't get a cure or treatment for this, I won't be able to eat solid food ever again. But the goodish news is that I was doing online research and my parents were doing online research too, and it looks like there is things that can help. We just need to find a doctor who can refer me to the right places to get the help that I need. So good news and bad news, but since I'm so open about my health issues on here, I wanted to give a little update. Okay, now on to the rest of this video. In October, I read 9 books, and my average star rating was 4 stars. Surprisingly, I liked every single book that I read this month, which is so rare for me. I had 1 reread, and 8 of them were books that I've never read before. So without further ado, let's crack on into this. The first book I read this month is a book that I read because the author is going to the Portland Book Festival, which I'm not sure if I will get this video up before or after the Portland Book Festival, but I'm hoping to see Aidan Thomas there because I know he'll be there, and I'm hoping to go to this like panel that he's going to be moderating, and then if it's like last year, they have like the panels that they're moderating and then a signing after the panel, so I'm hoping that they'll do it the same way. And then if they do, I'll get this book signed and I'll get the other book that I have by this author signed, even though I haven't read the other book by this author. Anyways, the book that I'm talking about is Cemetery Boys by Aidan Thomas. This was a standalone for a while, but it is getting a sequel, so now I can say that this is the first book in the Cemetery Boys series. So Cemetery Boys follows Yadriel, and Yadriel is trans, and he wants to prove to his family that he is a boy and that he is a brujo, because there's brujos and brujas. Brujos more like they can send ghosts like on, like send them on to the next like realm, next universe, and then brujas are more about healers, and he's trying to prove that he is a brujo because his family and a lot of people in the community only see him as the gender that he was assigned at birth. So he performs a ritual to prove that he is a real brujo. So he performs a ritual to bring someone back, like he summons a ghost. And he ends up summoning Julian Diaz. And Julian, or Julian, don't know which, I'm guessing Julian because this book has a lot of Spanish-speaking characters and it's Julian in Spanish, I think. I don't know, I'm very bad at names. So Yadriel decides that he is going to help figure out what happened to Julian and why he died, and so it's sort of like a mystery unfolding where Yadriel and Julian are trying to figure out what happened and figure out this mystery that seems connected to a death of one of Yadriel's cousins. So I enjoyed this one a lot. I want to share my favorite quote from this book. Yadriel was drawn to him like a moth to a flame. To his foolhardy charm and striking features, Julian was achingly beautiful, but in the way a thunderstorm was beautiful, wild, rough, electric, and bound to leave devastation in his wake. So this book is extremely hyped, and because of that, I felt disappointed for a lot of the book, because I was like, this is one of the most hyped books that I've ever seen in my life, so it's gotta be this like amazing book that's a literary masterpiece. And I was like, why isn't it living up fully to the hype? So I really liked Julian, and I liked his friend group. Truthfully, I liked the friend group better than the main characters in the story, so the sequel better focus on the friend group more. I thought the representation was great in here. I thought there was great conversation surrounding Yadriel being trans in here. And I thought there was great Latinx rep in here. It's talking a lot about Dia de los Muertos and sort of what's happening in Dia de Muertos, and it talks about a lot of like Latinx mythology as well, which was really interesting and done really well. Now, I couldn't give this one 5 stars though, even though I did enjoy it. So there's like 2 issues. For the first 75% of this book, it was slow. It wasn't boring. It was just a little too slow and needed a little more action. I think the last 25% of the story was like perfect pacing, done really well. But the first 75%, I was like, it needs to speed up a little bit. My other big criticism is that, like, I don't know how to say this without spoiling it. To make a long story short, there's a massive plot hole involved in the final like battle / scene. And I was like, this plot hole makes it so that the rest of the story doesn't make any sense at all. If you want to know more about that, I will link my written review down in the description below, because I added a spoiler tag on Goodreads for that section where I'm talking about this plot hole. But I was like, someone should have caught that, because just I try to figure out how to say it without spoiling it. Julian's ghost basically shouldn't have been with Yadriel for the whole story, based on something that's revealed during the final like battle. And that's what I'll say. So it did have that plot hole, and it was a little slow, but I did really enjoy it, so I gave it 4 stars. I think if Aiden just like touches up on the pacing a little bit, I think that the sequel to this book will be phenomenal. Told myself I would film this video quickly, like I always say I'm gonna do, and like always, I did not film this video quickly. Next book I read is Demon Slayer Volume 13, which is by Koyoharu Gotoge. So this is one of the volumes in the Swordsmith Village arc. The Swordsmith Village arc, I have a lot of mixed feelings about. Like, I feel like it starts off like fairly slow, but then it gets like really freaking good. I think that the battles in this section of the series are super duper creative, and I love to see Genya's backstory. Well, Genya and his brother, because both of their backstories are in here. So I love this one, and I gave it 5 stars. Oh, and it's worth noting that when I say that the Swordsmith Village arc has some slow parts, it's more like the volume before this. It's not really like this volume in particular, because at this volume the fight has already like started, so you're already deep in the action. And then I read a book from NetGalley, and I got this book a while ago because I'm really behind on my NetGalley books. Literally, someone needs to stop me from going on requesting sprees. Let's count how many more books from NetGalley I have to read. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. And like 3 of them are nonfiction. And I struggle with nonfiction. Someone needs to stop me from going on requesting sprees. Anyways, this next book that I read is Psych and Arrows by Luna McNamara. I've talked about this once on my channel, I think, before already. So this is sort of like a reimagining or like an elaboration of a Greek myth that doesn't get much attention. So it follows Psych and Arrows, obviously. Psych and Arrows follows Psych and Arrows, obviously. Psyche is a princess, and there's a prophecy that she is destined to be a hero. So she is fighting, she's training, she's really epic and strong. Eros is the god of desire, and so he has this bow and arrow, and he can shoot the bow and arrow, and whoever his arrow hits, that person then falls hopelessly in love with whoever they see next. So Eros was adopted by the goddess Aphrodite, and Aphrodite doesn't like Psyche. So Aphrodite puts this curse on this arrow so that after the arrow strikes someone, then that person will become hopelessly in love with whoever they see next. But as soon as the 2 of them lay eyes on each other, they'll be separated forever. So she's wanting Psyche to fall in love with a human and then basically have the human die, and then Psyche live in constant heartbreak and misery. But unfortunately, when Eros is going to go shoot the arrow at Psyche, he accidentally pricks himself with the arrow and falls in love with Psyche. So it's a romance that follows a lot of Greek mythology and sheds light on a lot of Greek mythology that's forgotten about and not talked about much. My dog will not stop barking. Girl! This video is gonna take forever to film. I have a lot of mixed feelings on this book. I would overall say that I enjoyed it. It's really the middle section that I enjoyed, because I feel like the opening and ending was pretty terrible. The opening was like 20% of info dumping and like just giving you a history of Psyche and Eros's life. So it's covering like 18 years, I think, in Psyche's life and like thousands of years in Eros's life. So it felt like a lot of info dumping and a lot of the stuff like wasn't relevant to the story. So I was like, you should have just started as soon as the action started, which is when I started to enjoy the book, once the action started. And when that happened, that was when Eros accidentally pricked himself with the arrow. So I really liked Psyche and Eros together as a couple. I wasn't super fond of each of them individually. Like if this book had focused solely on Psyche or solely on Eros, I would have been bored. But I liked the way that they came together, and I liked their chemistry, and I liked the talks that they had with each other. Psyche was really stubborn and daring, while Eros was really kind and he's protective, and I thought it was just a really cute combination. I also found that even though I didn't start out liking each of them individually, by the end of the story, I did care for each of them individually. Like I ended up being like really nervous about what happened to Psyche. And I was like, wow, I can't believe I started out hating these characters and now I'm like nervous for their fate. I really like the settings in the middle part of the book. Specifically, there's like this seaside house that is described so beautifully and has so much magic like mixed into the seaside house that I absolutely loved. There were some deadly trials in here, and I love me a good book with deadly trials. I won't go into too much of that here, like about like why it happened and stuff like that, because that would be a spoiler, but there is trials in this book, so if you do like deadly trials, then this may be a book that you want to consider reading. I also really like how this book portrayed some of the Greek characters. So I liked how it portrayed Hecate. I've never said that name out loud before. Hekate. Persephone, Medusa, and Demeter. I really loved how they were depicted. And I also thought it was really fun, like Zephyrus and his like relationship. I say fun, it's also extremely depressing, his relationship, but I really wanted a whole book like focusing on Zephyrus. Now, two more criticisms of this book. I thought that there was more Eros chapters that were needed because there was long sections of this book where it was just Psyche, and I was like, I need a little more Eros in here. Like I get Psyche is the one having the action, but Eros is a huge part of the book. His name is in the title. Give us a little bit more of him. And the ending I didn't like because I feel like it just did the same thing as the start, where it's just rushing through several years in the lives of these characters, and I was like, no, just stop it as soon as the action stops. And also I felt like Psyche's personality sort of like disappeared in the conclusion. But the middle section of this book was so phenomenal. But just the freaking start and the freaking end. So I have a lot of mixed feelings on this book, as you can probably tell, but I overall enjoyed it, so I gave it 3 stars. And then I read another Demon Slayer volume. I read volume 14. So this one gives a backstory to Mitsuri Kenroji and gives a backstory to Muichiro Tokito. I love Muichiro's backstory. I mean, it's like really heartbreaking, but it is so well done. This author is so good at writing heartbreaking backstories and giving all the characters heartbreaking like histories and stuff. I mean, I like him, but it's so hard, and it's like I have this like love-hate relationship thing. Yeah, and also Muichiro has such good banter in this book with the demon that he's fighting, but I don't like Mitsuri's backstory. I just don't. And I'm sorry, because like I know that there's only 2 women in the Hashiras, so like I feel like I should like those 2 women, but I'm not a huge Mitsuri fan. I've considered cosplaying her because I love her hair, but like, girly, you're risking your life for like a reason that I was like, that's a little bit lame. Like, how do all these characters have these heartbreaking backstories that are really powerful and really emotional, and then Mitsuri's like, eh. So I ended up giving this one 4 stars just because of Mitsuri's backstory. I like her fighting. I have a love-hate relationship with her, okay? Don't hate me for saying all that about Mitsuri. Then I listened to an audiobook. I listened to Lord of the Shadows, which is the 11th book in the saga of Darren Shan, or the Circuit of Freaks series, and it is written by Darren Shan. So I can't really spoil too much about what this is about, so I'm just going to start off with what the first book is about, because the plot has evolved so much, as I've said whenever I talk about this series. The first book follows a boy, and there is a freak circus in town, and he goes to see the freak circus, and he realizes that there is a vampire in the midst of this freak circus, and he gets trapped up with the vampire and intertwined with the vampire's life. So I thought this one was really good. I thought it was really, really well written. It flows so smoothly, and I thought there was so much action that I really enjoyed. I love the grittiness, I love the violence, and it really helped up the stakes and the tension. However, I think I'm just like getting way too used to Darren Shan's style of writing because now I can predict every single plot twist in any of the Circuit of Freak books before it happens. So I predicted all of the plot twists in this freaking book. And I really wanted to be shocked, but I wasn't shocked. And yeah, I used to be so shocked by every plot twist on Circuit of Freak and I'd be like, oh my gosh, this is so wild. And now I'm like, I know what's gonna happen, so it's not as like shocking. So I ended up giving Lord of the Shadows 4 stars. So the next book I'm not going to talk about very much because the SAG-AFTRA strike is still going on as of the filming of this video. So this book was made into a movie that was made by a company that people are currently striking against, so I'm just going to talk about it briefly. I read Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince for the 3rd time. I absolutely love this book. Of course, since I've read it 3 times, Harry Potter is like the only series I reread. All of the characters that I was marking is in here, which makes me so happy. I love Flagettes. Look, it's so pretty. Half-Blood Prince is one of my favorite ones in the series because I feel like it gets so much darker and it reveals so much backstory to Voldemort, which is really fascinating. I gave this one 5 stars, of course. I could talk about it much longer, but I'm not going to because the strike. Though the strike could be done by the time that I upload this video. Fingers crossed, but I've been hearing really mixed reports and I wouldn't be surprised if the strike lasts into the new year. I'm sincerely hoping that it will get done really soon. It would be a great birthday present to have this strike end on my birthday, but I doubt that will happen. And then I read Demon Slayer Volume 15, and Volume 15 is so good. I am finally past where the anime is, so very proud of myself for getting caught up. It's very rare that I get caught up to where a anime is whenever I'm reading the manga because I feel like I space out my manga so much when I'm reading it. There was a ton of characters in this volume that I was not expecting to make a comeback and like make another appearance. So I was so happy. I was like internally screaming and I kept seeing all these panels. I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't wait to see this animated. So this is like the final section of the Swordsman of the Village arc, and then the second half is like, I don't even know how to describe it. It's sort of like training, but it isn't like boring training. It's like really, really freaking awesome training because they're training for something really big that's coming up. So I cannot wait to read the next volume, and I'm actually going to start volume 16 tonight. And I'll probably finish it tonight because I normally read mangas in one sitting. Then I read a book from Kindle Unlimited. I read Passing Through, which is the first book in the Three Rivers series by Katia Rose. I love Katia Rose, but unfortunately, this is my least favorite book that I read this month. I did enjoy it. As I said earlier, I enjoyed every single book I read this month, but this one was like not as good as I was hoping. So this is adult, and Katia Rose normally writes new adult, and I'm wondering if that's why, but this one, the pacing felt like so much slower than her other books, and it's a lot in part because she describes the setting so much, which I think is good to some extent, but I also think she could have cut back a little bit on the setting descriptions. So basically in this book, there are 2 girls and they are not interested in love. So Emily is just pouring herself into her work instead of dealing with grief. And the other girl, Kim, she is just traveling through the area. This book takes place on Vancouver Island. So she's just traveling through the area. She's camping all these different places because she had a messy breakup. And so she's sort of like going through a journey of discovering herself and telling herself she doesn't need to be in relationships to make herself happy because she was told that she's like clingy and she's told that she just goes from girl to girl, and so she's trying to just prove to herself she can be alone. So I really liked how Katia Rose wrote the struggles that Emily and Kim were going through. I thought it was really hard hitting. I really related to Kim's struggles, how she gets so clingy and attached to people so quickly. At least that's what her ex-girlfriend told her. I can definitely see it a little bit, but I think like things like that aren't always a bad thing. It's just some people view them as a bad thing. And I mean, I don't really date, but I've had that thing with friendships where like I feel like I become attached too quickly, and then I've had a couple of people like freak out on me over that. So like I really related to Kim, and some of her stuff really hit me hard. The only problem though is I didn't really connect to Emily and Kim like when it wasn't talking about their struggles. I don't know why. Like I just didn't really connect with either of them, and it doesn't have anything to do with like their age because this is an adult book as opposed to Katia normally writing new adult. I don't know, just I felt like I wanted more from them, and I wasn't given that. So I wasn't as fascinated and in love with them as I was hoping to be. Because normally when I read Caddy Rose's books, I'm like, oh my gosh, these characters are amazing. I'm in love with them. I literally want to be best friends with them. But I didn't like feel that with this book. Since I did enjoy this book though, I'm going to try and leave off on a positive note. So one of the things that I really enjoyed about this book, which surprised the crap out of me, is that I enjoyed the way that the third act conflict resolved itself. Normally third act conflicts are the bane of my existence, but in this book I was like, that's a really cute and action-packed way to end the third act conflicts. I thought that was done really well. So I like this one. It's not one of my favorites of Kadia's books, so I gave it 3 stars. I'm very sorry if you hear Astoria crying in the background. She doesn't like hurt my other dog Cookie. She just really wants to play. And Cookie is a senior dog with arthritis, and Cookie's like, get away from me, you little puppy. And so they were like in a little scuffle downstairs, so I separated them. Nothing like dangerous, but enough that I'm like, I need to protect my senior dog with arthritis and just let her have some alone time. So Astoria is currently in timeout in a kennel, and she's upset. Huge kennel. The kennel's meant for like an 80-pound dog, and Astoria is like 40 or 50 pounds, so she has tons of space in there. Having a puppy is fun but very stressful. And then I read an arc, and I got this one like physically because I won it in a Goodreads giveaway. This book is called My Last Innocent Year by Daisy Alpert Florin. I finished this last night. I finished it on Halloween. I think it was a perfect one to finish on Halloween because men are freaking scary, and this book just highlights why. So this book is a bit messy and intense to read, but I think it has some really good things about it. So this book takes place in 1998, and it follows this girl Isabel, and Isabel is in college. She's lost her mom, she's had a bit of a rough life, and in her final year of college she gets raped, and she gets raped by a friend. After that rape, she ends up finding herself in a grooming situation with a college professor. So it's very intense. But I think that in terms of the grooming, I think it was portrayed really well. I am a victim of grooming. In case you don't know, I was groomed in 2023 for a few months. Luckily, I got out before it got as bad as what happens in this book. But I thought that the way that the grooming was written was done really well, because it shows how subtle grooming can be. Because people think of grooming and they think it's something like really obvious, you'll be able to recognize it as grooming right away, but it isn't. So like, for example, in this book, some people might think of it as just an inappropriate student and teacher relationship, but there's a power imbalance here. There is a author who was once famous, who holds a position of power as a professor, and who is older and holds a position of power because of his age. Then there is a young girl who's in a vulnerable state, and she clings on to the positive praise that he gives to her work. He seems to give her work more positive praise and attention than some of the other like star students in her class. So it's easy to see how she would get wound up with this man. I've seen some reviews of people being like, it's not grooming. I'm like, yeah, it is. Grooming is oftentimes subtle and not as explicitly obvious as people think it is. So I thought that that representation and portrayal was really good. I also thought that it was good how they did the rape in here. That sounded really bad. I'm not saying that rape is good. I am saying that I liked how it showed how subtle rape can be as well. Because again, a lot of people think rape is like explicitly obvious. And at the end of the day, if it's not an enthusiastic yes, and you still have intercourse, it's rape. So I think this book did a good job of portraying that rape can look like that. Besides the triggering subjects, I really liked this author's style of writing. I can easily see myself reading more of her books. I flew through this one. It read sort of like a really fast-paced memoir. It was like bouncing around in Isabel's memories, which was done really well. Now, there's like one thing / two things, or one thing that's connected to another thing that I have an issue with this book. This book didn't go enough into the effects that grooming has on the victims. Like, clearly Isabel is struggling, but grooming impacts people so much. I mean, grooming is like manipulation to the extreme to get you to do these things with a person. And so I wish that would have dived more into how it was affecting her life, and I wish it would have gone more into like how negative her mental health would have been after the grooming and the rape occurred. But it sort of focused more on the actual act and not so much on the effects. So I think if people want to read this book, I think that's great. I think you will see really well what grooming looks like in this book, but I think you need to like read additional supplemental materials so you can see what the effects of grooming looks like. The other thing that's like sort of connected is the last 2 chapters sort of like go through Isabel's life, and the thing is, it doesn't seem like she got help for the grooming. It doesn't seem like she worked through the grooming, and so it leaves off on sort of a bleak note. And I was like, I know that not everyone can recover and get better after events like that happen to them, but at the same time, shouldn't you be giving hope to victims that they can get better and that there's a better future out there? Because she doesn't have a better future. And I'm like, shouldn't we show that there is a better future out there so that victims get hope? That's something I feel a lot about books that deal with these triggering subjects. I'm like, you can write about them and you can write about how depressing it is, but at some point you also need to be like, okay, we need that hope part in there too. So yeah, I think it lacked some things, but I think it was also good in some parts. I think if you're going to read this book, also read up extensively on how grooming impacts victims, so you can get a full picture of grooming and what it looks like. Storia is like really upset that I haven't let her out of the kennel yet. It's only been like 8 minutes that she's been in there. So I've got to wrap up this video. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, feel free to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to me if you haven't already. I hope that the next time I talk to you, the actor's strike has been resolved so that I can go back to talking about all my usual nerdy stuff that I love to talk about. I hope all of you have a great November, and I hope all of you had a fun Halloween, and I will see all of you in my next video. Until next time, goodbye.